topics and opinions expressed in the following show are solely those of the hosts and their guests and not those of W4CY Radio, its employees, or affiliates. We make no recommendations or endorsements for radio show programs, services, or products mentioned on air or on our web. No liability, explicit or implied, shall be extended to W4CY Radio or its employees or affiliates. Any questions or comments should be directed to those show hosts. Thank you for choosing W4CY Radio.
Well, welcome to the Bill Martinez Show. Good to have you with us, sharing a part of your day. Our next topic is the deepening and hidden border crisis. New Epoch Times, and I think sometimes I say epic, some people say epoch, but you know what I mean. Either one, the Epoch Times documentary titled Gotaways take a deep dive into the hidden border crisis. We have producer and editor Kay Rubacek joining us, and she's going to talk about this startling new film. This is the whole truth and nothing but. This isn't something that the government, the Biden administration, or Secretary of Homeland Security, Mayorkas, is saying to us. They went to the border to find out what the truth and what it really was all about. Kay Rubacek, welcome to the show. Good to have you with us.
Thank you so much for having me.
Well, do you say epoch or epic?
I usually say epoch, but sometimes I'll slip and say epic. Both are fine.
Okay,
but
good.
I have an Australian accent, so maybe I'm excused.
Well, we love that. So yeah, I've been back and forth, and every time I talk to somebody from Epoch Times, they'll go, "Well, you know, it's epoch." I guess they still haven't decided, but I hope they do for the sake of their brand, because they're doing such a great job, especially with these documentaries, right?
They sure are. I think that having the finger on the pulse is so important for news these days. And they actually started working on this documentary 2 years ago because they already knew that this was the biggest story that we need to know before the election. And so they already saw that in advance before I even got involved. So I could just see that, they know what's going on with news and what's important.
Well, to your point, Kay, more and more people are turning to the Epoch Times because they're true journalists, unlike what the mainstream media sadly has become. You know, you think of all the money, the protection of our First Amendment right, and their duty to serve we the people. Sadly, they've decided not to serve we the people, but to serve them, the government.
That's very true. And when you see big corporations, big government, and big media all working together, that's when you start looking into really kind of corporate socialism that is starting to control things. But what with this documentary, it's just an example of real journalism. The director and essentially the crew of one was Charlotte Cuthbertson. She's the director, writer of this movie. She spent 2 years living in a border town which is wide open, 16 miles of open border with Mexico, more than 240 hours riding in cars with sheriffs, with ranchers, with 240 hours. What kind of journalists do that? It's the ones that really want to give you a front row seat so that you don't have to necessarily go to the border to know what's going on. But if you don't go there, you won't get it. So that's what this documentary is all about. So yeah, that's true journalism.
Yeah. And what she's done is hold in contrast her POV, her point of view, right there at the front line versus what we're seeing and hearing from, the Department of Homeland Security, Mayorkas.
It's true because, and there is her point of view in there, but at the same time, the feedback we've been getting for this documentary is that it's not emotionally manipulative. It's not pushing an agenda, and it just takes you into the cars riding with sheriffs. We've even had people saying, you've edited out the violence that the police do. And I mean, that's laughable because it just means that so many people don't realize what it's like outside of the big cities in America.
Exactly.
And that's where so many of us are. And we have to be seeing that on television.
Well, to your point, the perception is that whenever you have people in uniform, there's got to be some violence. There's got to be some, some crime that the guys in uniform and with a gun are doing. I mean, look what happened when the border agents on horseback were trying to control people. The narrative, even coming from the president of the United States, was that they were whipping these people. There was no such thing.
It's really sad, isn't it? Because,
Yeah.
I'm a mother of 2 children, and I want my kids to respect, law and order.
Yes.
And for that, they need to be able to respect the people who help maintain that in our society. And if
Mhm.
they're getting these opposing narratives and things that don't make sense, it makes it really hard for the next generation to kind of understand what's going on. It's really it's we have to get things straight, right? We don't want things
Well,
to get so
exactly.
mixed up.
Because our kids, everybody else's kids, our grandkids that are coming up, they've got a big mess to clean up because of these social justice warriors that want to defund police, compromise the idea of law and order, for this victimization complex that has taken over. And there is just grave damage done that, Kay, I'm afraid it could take decades to reconcile this.
That is a big issue, isn't it?
Yeah.
Because that's where it is generations. And I often look at in my books and movies, I often look at the effect of socialism, communist ideology
Mhm.
on people and societies. And so, looking at the border in this particular issue, we got to look at it in a really looking at the tip of the iceberg, and it's
Mhm.
so shocking. But
Right.
when you see the type of lawlessness that's being carried out, then you start to realize what we need to undo, because
Mhm.
we're getting things mixed up. We're calling people immigrants when they are not. They are illegal. And
Yes.
and that's just a simple distinction. That's not an
Mhm.
opinion. That's
Right.
according to American law. But the media will call them immigrants, and we will repeat that because we don't know any better.
Mhm.
So that's where we need to start getting our language right. And I think that's a really important part to what you're saying, if
Mhm.
of that, getting things right and undoing what's been done, because our
Mhm.
language is being twisted around. And we
Exactly.
need to know what are gotaways, what are
Mhm.
give ups, what are illegal immigrants, what are legal immigrants. We got to
Mhm.
start getting that right now.
No, you're exactly right. But that is the model consistently over the ages, Kay. And I just can't believe that we're so ignorant. But unfortunately, the mainstream media has entered into this, this type of, bent journalism and biased journalism that wants to promote a narrative and agenda far from the truth. And so they go along with the words, our language being hijacked and confusing people all the more. But when you go back and study the history of socialism and communism and Marxism, that's one of the first things they do is they take over the language. They start redefining things. And then if you don't say the right word, well, then they've got ways to get you to conform, much like what we're experiencing right now, whether it's the cancel culture. I mean, there are some, even some platforms, Kay, right now, we're fortunate because we are an independent network, but even still, there are some guidelines in certain areas that we can't talk about. And that's, I'll tell you, you have no idea how crazy that makes me, because the reason I decided to do this and get behind the microphone after being away from broadcasting and a microphone for many years, and I've been behind the microphone again and now in front of a camera for 15 years, was because I wanted to pursue the truth for the sake of the American people, no matter where it led. Let's follow the truth. But unfortunately, now the powers, whether it's Facebook, YouTube, these other social media oligarchs, along with the mainstream media, they've all entered into a backroom cabal that says, okay, anything that doesn't agree with their perspective is misinformation and worthy of canceling.
And that's when it becomes propaganda, right? It's
Yeah,
no
exactly.
longer no longer news. It's no longer truth. And in some of my research, I've looked at trainings that the Chinese Communist Party, for example, gives to they call them journalists. And I've interviewed many journalists, and I've interviewed even people that were involved in the administration of the propaganda department. They don't call it the news department or the media, they call it propaganda. Though they did change the translation. They kept the Chinese name the same, but they changed the English translation to be publicity department. But I said, is the Chinese name still the same? They said, yeah. They just change it so it's a little bit more palatable to us. But they say very clearly they don't do news. Their journalists do not do news. They do propaganda and spin, period. That's what they do. And they have to follow the party line. Otherwise, they're out. That's it.
That's the way it is. And that's the way it's becoming here in America, sadly, ladies and gentlemen. I mean, you check it out for yourself. We're talking with the producer and editor, Kay Rubacek, with Epoch Times and the documentary Gotaways, which takes a deeper dive into the hidden border crisis. Kay, why did Epoch Times 2 years ago decide that they needed to do this?
Well, people haven't been, there's so many things that are being seen about the border on all media. Now everyone's is talking about it. And in general, I think a lot of us have this kind of border fatigue, feeling like, oh, yeah, we know it already. We know there's a problem. And that's part of the problem, is that they make us feel like we don't need to know more about it, that we already know what's going on, when that's not true. Because what we haven't seen is things like the Gotaways. 1.7 million that we know of. There's many more that we don't know of, but we don't have
I was going to say, how did they come up with that number? I mean, if they're Gotaways, I mean, are they sticking their finger up in the air and just kind of coming up with, an estimate here? And much the same way that you hear them today, they still use an old number from, decades ago, saying in the United States, there's 13 million illegal immigrants. Well, it's not like, things have stopped 20 years ago. They've continued to grow. And I think that number, our guess is as good as anybody else, probably about 25, 30 million illegal immigrants in this country right now.
They are trying to play it safe with the numbers. So that 1.7 million since the Biden administration took over, that's very conservative. And they have to look at a percentage of what they are aware of. And that's based, these border authorities, border patrol, sheriffs on the border, they know what, they're dealing with this 24/7.
Yes.
So I think their estimates, at least on this low end, are accurate.
I'd probably count on them than I would the government, because the government has a way of, massaging the numbers.
It's true. And really, that's why just in general, Epoch Times tries to go on the conservative numbers, not to try and, exaggerate things, and just try and play it safe so that people can make their own choices. And then as new information comes out and it gets verified, then we can present it. And that's what we found with these Gotaways on the media. We're usually seeing give ups. That's usually women and children coming through ports of entry, like coming to the front door of America, and they're coming through and they're given amnesty to come in. They know they're going to come in, even though, so that there is a different type of illegality on that. Right. But then there's these Gotaways. If they're coming through intentionally evading Border Patrol, then it means they know they wouldn't get in the normal way. Exactly. So in most cases, they have a criminal record, and some of them really serious crimes. And a lot of them are being caught on the border by our sheriffs and deputy sheriffs who are completely overwhelmed. And that's who you see front and center. Exactly. But here's the kicker, Bill, is that they're being aided by Americans. Yes. There's American citizens, and you see this front row in this movie, of all ages, especially targeting youths, but even, adults in their 60s, going to the border and participating in human smuggling. And they may not realize that they're not bringing immigrants in, they're bringing illegals who often have a criminal record, are going to go to some town, maybe near you, and cause havoc and crime. And if you're participating in that, it's a real, a lot of people don't realize. They think they can make a few quick bucks, but they are getting caught, and we show that.
Well, and the thing is these illegals that are coming across, we know this, Kay. I mean, the windfall profit for the cartels last year was something like $13 billion. They own these people coming across the border. Nobody gets across the border unless they've gone through the turnstiles of the cartels. And so, they give them wristbands that Mayorkas didn't even know about, which just absolutely baffles me, Kay.
Yes, I went to the border 2 years ago myself, and that's when I started doing some reporting with Charlotte Cuthbertson, and
Mhm.
we saw the wristbands, we saw the trash, all the things that we see, and it's more commonly in the media now, but people weren't talking about it back then. And we also saw, and you'll see a bit of this in the movie, but up close with cartel members bringing illegal immigrants. But these are give ups. These are the give ups. They're not the
Mhm.
gotaways. We have a
Right.
lot of gotaways, so we don't focus on the give ups. But you see
Mhm.
the cartel members. This was one story that shocked me the most, was seeing a cartel member in one night. Within just a few hours, they brought over a few hundred illegal
Mhm.
immigrants, mostly women and children. And we had, it was like 12 p.m. at night. It was at midnight. It was dark. And I
Wow.
was afraid to turn on our camera lights because I thought we might deter them when we want to film them.
Mm.
We
Yes.
ended up turning the lights on. They didn't care. They were grateful to have the lights because it made their job easier. And
Yes.
because there was a lot of rocks. And so the illegals were coming across on these rocks, being smuggled. And we were just filming them point blank, just a few feet away from us. And
Wow.
the cartel operator was smiling, laughing. When he got tired, another one came over, took his place, and brought more illegals across. That's one bend in the river, one night for a few hours.
Wow.
Border authorities were completely overwhelmed. This happens every night.
Exactly.
And just down in another bend where there was no lights and no border authorities, there were other
Mhm.
rafts coming across, probably with gotaways,
Exactly.
drugs, and
Mhm.
weapons.
Well, and that's their strategy, okay? They want to keep Border Patrol busy with these women and young children, uh, that you talk about, that they're glad to, receive them in that. But while they're busy dealing with them, then the gotaways. And think about this for just a moment. 1.7 million so far. That's a lot of people and a lot of danger potentially, especially when you think 9/11 for America wasn't that far, that far down the road. And it only took 19 people to do the kind of damage that they wrecked on 9/11. And here we are, we're letting them in by the hundreds of thousands.
And we focus on Kinney County, so it's different to New York City,
Mhm.
where 9/11 took place. But it's the locals are calling it a war zone to some
Oh, of
extent
course.
because they cannot. They have to board up their windows at night, especially the ranchers, because if there's any light coming through, these illegal immigrants, these gotaways, are coming through and breaking into their homes, and these are ranches. They're big pieces of land.
Yeah,
911 takes an hour to get to many of them.
right.
And these gotaways will cut sections of fence to get through, not once, twice. It just keeps
Mhm.
getting cut. And these
Exactly.
ranchers, if the cows get out onto the road, the
Oh,
rancher is liable for any damage that cow does. So they cannot run cattle anymore.
right.
And that affects us here. So there's so many flow-on effects with these the car chases, and you see a
Mhm.
lot of them in the movie, high-speed car chases right
Right.
in front of schools.
Yeah.
It's extremely dangerous, and this is one small county with 3,000 people. And
Mm.
to your point on the numbers, Bill, is that they so in the last 5 years, in the last year or so, before they
Mhm.
used to prosecute maybe 5 border crimes a month. There's always been some border crime. Now they've been prosecuting up to 500 or 600 a month.
Oh,
A month.
not surprising. Not
And
surprising.
this county only has 3,000 people, yet they've prosecuted 5,000 people in the last 2 years. So you
Mm.
do the numbers on that, and that's coming past. They're the front line. If we don't protect and fortify them,
Yeah.
we're really in trouble.
Well, and that's why everybody's saying that every state has become a border state, Kate Rubacek.
Mhm.
Kay Rubacek is with us. She's a producer and editor with Epoch Times. Of course, we're talking the border. And as you say, these are huge numbers. And, and I feel for these farmers. I mean, I'm surprised that they're still holding their ground, because how do they defend themselves, Kay? I mean, I'm not hearing any stories where, they've had to shoot somebody. And of course, if they're shooting somebody, they don't know what they're going to get back, because the cartels, as we saw the other day, I think over the weekend, they were showing cartel members coming across the border with automatic weapons. I mean, this is like a mini army coming in to the interior of the United States of America.
And the ranchers have to defend themselves. They have no choice right now. They either
Mhm.
have to leave the property or they have to defend themselves. In the movie, we have some very brave ranchers who
Mhm.
spoke with us, because so many of them, it's very difficult for them because they have their business to run, they have their families to protect.
Exactly.
If they put their names and things out there publicly, that they may be afraid of repercussions. But there's a number of very brave ones who have testified publicly, and a few also that came on camera with us. And
Mhm.
my goodness, they're amazing. And but some of them, they have to sleep with pistols under their pillows. They
Oh,
have
wow. Mm.
they have their wives, they have to have pistols on them all the time on the property. And they also have to clean up a lot of dead bodies. And
Well,
who
yeah,
wants to do that?
that's the other thing that people aren't reporting. And here we are. We just got through the summer, and with the heat, and what I was hearing, Kay, from from our contacts, was the body count of people they were discovering out in the desert. Just dead. You see, and this is the thing that is so crushing to me, to think that our government is participating in this kind of victimization and really a modern form of slavery is what it comes down to.
It really is. And I think that's where, if we can get better, get the language right on who these
Mhm.
people are and everything, then when we do see news reports, we can understand them better with our own brains, right?
Mhm.
Instead of just being spoon-fed whatever the media wants to tell us.
Mhm.
And like, for example, Texas Governor Abbott tried to put up a barrier in the river, the Rio Grande,
Yes.
which is, a big part of our border,
Mhm. Right.
and to deter illegals from coming across. Meanwhile, the Biden administration isn't happy about that because they say it could cause them harm to the illegals. Meanwhile, the
Well,
illegal immigrants are
it wasn't like we
dying.
put alligators out there, Kay. Come on, give me a break.
I know. I
I
mean,
mean, I got you.
meanwhile,
I'm from Florida. Some people have thought about that. Just saying.
yes, exactly. I mean, when you
Yeah,
know the terrain, it
right.
is hot. There is no water. And that's why people are looking for ranches.
Mhm.
And these illegals are desperate.
Yeah.
They've been put into a desperate situation by the administration, who says, come. But the Gotaways know they cannot come through the front door. So they're coming through the side door, and they are facing death, dehydration, and having to deal with ranches. And that's all just coming to a head right outside
Yes.
of our ports of entry. We've got to get people going back to the front door. Don't come in through our basement or the side window.
Mhm.
It's disrespecting our homes. It's
Without a
disrespecting the
doubt.
nation.
Kay, what's the comparison that you discovered between the Trump administration got away numbers versus now?
Well, it was made very clear in the Democratic Party debate in 2019, and we include a bit of that in the movie, just because that's good journalism, right? You
Mhm.
see for
Yes.
yourself. It's not us saying anything.
Mhm.
When Biden was a nominee, he said, "I would encourage people to surge to the border."
Mhm.
And since then, um, eh, and we list out all the things, with border and immigration policy that changed almost immediately after President Biden took power.
Mhm.
Then and you see just the lowering of all the things that had been put into place by the Trump administration,
Exactly.
and just the weakening of the intentional weakening of the border. And so seeing the result on the ground is what I think can really help people open their eyes to this. And if everyone could talk about this in a more like, like, if when I thought I knew about the border, right?
Mhm.
Because I've been reporting on it
Right.
and watching the news. But when I went there and when I saw it, it's like when you try to describe a war zone to somebody, it's
Right.
very difficult. And we try to make war zone movies to help people understand the dangers and death of war. So I haven't seen other media go and spend time at the border longer than like a week or two
Mhm.
and put something together in a longer format that
Right.
really makes you feel what the people there feel. And then you understand beyond, like, don't just read the headlines. You have to
Exactly.
feel it. You have to be there. And this is a way to do that.
You've got to know it, as we said, Kay. You've got to own your own knowledge. If you're only going to take the talking points and you're told what's going on. I mean, keep in mind, up until 2015, when Donald Trump came on the scene, nobody talked about the border. It just was happening, and it was crazy under the Obama Biden administration, but they just didn't even talk about it, and didn't even talk about the cartels. And if there was any mention of the cartels, Kay, it was this idea, this illusion that the cartels are just south of the border. Now we discovered that the cartels have an infrastructure deep within the United States, probably involving almost every state of the union except for maybe 8. So that says something, especially when you talk about, dispensing of drugs and fentanyl, from China, human sex trafficking that's going on. And, with this new movie, Sound of Freedom, America still is in shock to understand that we are the number one sex trafficking, country on the planet. I mean, who could think that the United States would be so guilty?
And I mean, there's two sides to everything, isn't there? And I feel like, because I'm a legal immigrant. I came to this country 12 years ago, and I see both sides of the debate. I see their international propaganda waged against America and the American people to make the American people look down on themselves,
Right.
and undermine the greatness that this country was founded on.
Mhm.
And then there's the American people falling for that. And I had people in Australia say to me, "Why would you go to America? You might become like an American." I said, "What's so bad about that? I mean, hey, since a kid, I was taught
Yeah.
that Coca-Cola and McDonald's are great American food, and we
Right.
watch Hollywood movies. What's the problem?"
Right.
And
Exactly.
but when I came here, and I've traveled to more than 20 states in this great nation,
Mhm.
and I just find the American people, the general American people are
Right.
wonderful,
Exactly.
true, good, and kind. Now, but that's something that can be taken advantage of.
Mhm.
They try to
And
make
they,
us.
and they are, Kay, the bottom
Yes.
line. And that's a great observation, because we, the people, these people that you're talking about, which is really the backbone of this great American idea, they are being greatly and gravely misrepresented by their elected officials, in my humble opinion.
Yes, yes, I definitely agree, and it's an international
Mhm.
effort too. There's other
Yeah.
global players that are trying to do the same thing, and so it makes us feel like, oh no, we are the number one worst at this and this and this and this and this.
Mhm.
Whereas I think what we need to get back to is what makes this country great, what makes the American people great, and it really is their openness and kindness. And
Exactly.
that's something that, sure, socialists will try to take advantage of. But if we hold to truth, there's nothing to fear, nothing to worry about. And
Right.
I think with great movies like Sound of Freedom coming out, and and that's focusing on the trafficking side. Our movie Gotaways focuses more on the smuggling side.
Mhm.
And if people could know the difference between the two, it would help us.
Yeah.
Then we can start to, people can start to realize, like, maybe I won't participate in human smuggling, because now that I know that's smuggling. And if they see, oh, maybe I won't participate in clicking on that porn link,
Yes.
then I won't fund that industry that leads to child abuse
Yes.
and
Exactly.
trafficking, and of course
Mhm.
pedophilia and all that. But that's abuse either way,
Yeah.
as far as I'm concerned. So
Exactly.
it's by raising awareness and people looking at these things, because they're hard to look at. And we often just want to push it aside and just deal with the easy things. But we do have
Mhm.
to look at these things now and say,
Mhm.
I don't want it. My
Right.
family doesn't want it. My community doesn't want it. We will not participate in those things that we know are bad, because Americans don't do that. And
Okay.
the ones who want to participate, well, they can take the rap for that. But it's really, we shouldn't let that pull us all down and feel like, oh, we're hopeless. We can't do anything, because that's also part of an agenda to make us feel um to really pull down the spirit of this nation. And I think we
Mhm.
have to get that back.
Yeah, we have to remember what we stand for, Kay. That's what you're saying. And it's so critical. Again, we've been shouting from the timbers on this show, is that we must return to first principles. Like anything, like any good business, entrepreneur, producer, editor, when you feel like maybe you've lost a little bit, you go back, you pause for a moment and say, let's go back and find out where I made the wrong turn. And this country has that opportunity still right now to do this, because like you just cited, there are many good people here in this country. And that's what gives me hope, Kay. I enlisted in the Marine Corps to defend this country, to defend the Constitution. My brothers as well. We were represented in one form or another during Vietnam, our father during World War II. We believe in this country. We're proud of this country, and we're proud of the people in it. We definitely have our problems and issues with those who don't care about this country and want to destroy it. Now, and that's where it begins and that's where it ends. And I will continue to fight for everybody for the sake of the Constitution. Those are first principles. And the invitation is for us en masse to remember what it's all about. It's not about a party. It's not about a Democratic Party or Republican Party. It's not about a president or anybody like that. It's about America. It's those true core principles that we can all rally around, believe in, and then, going forward to make sure that the people that we elect into office feel the same way and they act the same way. Sadly, as I mentioned, referred to here slightly, is that America has been misrepresented by its elected officials. And to me, it borders treason.
Yes. I mean, we put those people in place, and we have to hold them accountable.
Exactly.
I often refer
and whether or not you can say, well, they lied to us, doesn't matter. Okay. And we get a chance to change things every 2 years when it comes to the House, every 4 years on a general election. And we have to make sure that our elections going forward are truly free, fair, and transparent, and that it truly is the consent of the governed, not some manufactured vote count that somebody else has manufactured.
I agree. And I think that a big part of it is that media, education, big corporations try to disempower us and make us feel that we as an individual don't count and really can't make a difference. And I have so many people say to me, well, what can I do? It's just me.
Yeah.
And I say, well, that's exactly the point.
That's what they want you to think. Yeah.
And that's what, any form of tyranny, and I've studied a lot of forms of tyranny, especially under communism, is what keeps a tyrannical dictator up at night is the fear that you as an individual, or me, won't be controlled by them, that our minds will break free of their manipulation, and we will say, no, because you can't control me. I was created by something greater than you. You're not God, as far as I'm concerned. Then that means that I have power in my own right. I was created in a miraculous way, as every human being was. So when that starts to get undermined, you start to see yourself as worthless, as individuals, as hopeless. And then you start to feel like, well, I can't do anything. I need big government to take care of me. And you hand over your power. Once it's gone, it's very hard to get it back. So we need to rekindle that sense of hope and humanity and value of like, wow, we're all pretty miraculous. Just walking, talking miracles when you think about it, really. Science cannot explain the miracles of human life, and they've never been able to. So
try as they might
control it. Yeah.
It's so laughable, Kay, to your point. And you get back to that old axiom, he who is willing to surrender their freedom for security is not worthy of any. And I think we've seen this in recent history. If you go back in the things that you're referring to, and you look back in the most recent historical record of other countries who have fallen victim and began to perceive themselves as less than. I mean, look what happened in Germany during World War II. You're talking maybe 10% of Germany were Nazis, and Germany was a once vibrant Christian, God-fearing nation, and 90% of them ended up finding themselves under the boot of the Fuhrer and Nazi Germany.
Yes, it's devastating. And my family escaped Soviet Russia. They
Wow.
were Russians, great grandparents were Russians, and then the
Yeah.
Bolsheviks came in, and it only took a few of them, a few thousand, like 2,000 or so, to take over. But
Amazing, huh?
they had money from other very wealthy supporters outside of the country who helped
Mhm.
to fund. So there was still that collaboration between outsiders and a few people on the ground
Mhm.
trying to do that. And so they had to escape, and they went to China, where my father was born and raised
Oh.
as a young Russian boy living in Northeast China. But then the Communist Party took over there.
Mhm.
And they were very fortunate to get out during the famine time, and came to Australia. And another point is, my husband's family escaped the former Czechoslovakia before the
Oh,
Berlin Wall
wow.
fell, and he was a young boy.
Wow.
And so
Mm.
I look at, my family's history, and when I say to people, I mean, my story is not really unique. I came 3 times escaping communism, maybe, but really, I think everybody knows someone that comes from a country that they came here to escape tyranny, oppression,
Mhm.
very often by a communist regime, and they've come here because there is nowhere left to run.
Right.
And that is the truth. Everyone's looking to America and saying, "What are you Americans going to do? Are you going
Exactly.
to just give in?" Like the other countries, we've got the benefit of learning from the other
Mhm.
countries, and also the
Yeah.
foundation of this nation. So we've got a
Without
lot
a
that we
doubt.
can utilize.
Maybe we should reread what Tocqueville had to say in his observation about this great country, right? I think maybe that might help us get to first principles as well. Kay Rubacek is with us, producer and editor with the New Epoch Times documentary Gotaways. We're going to talk more about that in just a moment. But, Kay, you touched on something here that I want our viewers to really grasp here, and that is, uh, you know, this illusion of what happens, these outside power brokers who come in and support the face of power, promising, collective peace and, prosperity for everybody, all these good things that they know darn well they can't deliver, but they're very convincing and charming, and they're able to take power away from people, and they centralize it, and the people that end up with it all eventually all goes back to those people that invested in the revolution to begin with, right?
Right. And, we have this benefit of seeing that throughout history
Mhm.
again and
Yeah.
again and again. But we're being persuaded by media and technology. And I'm not against technology or whatever, but I'm just very aware that when you start, before we used to read books, you have to
Mhm.
turn a page. It takes a bit longer, right? You can't
Yeah.
just scroll through, or use an automatic reader or double speed, whatever. Then we started reading on computers, and then now we're reading. Now we're not even reading; it's just scrolling. So this
Right.
kind of short-term um, attention, and it's making us think short-term. Whereas
Mm.
those who are conspiring to maintain power, they have a very long-term plan.
Exactly.
And that's where the cartels and others working with them, they are thinking long term, and they want us to be distracted so that we
Oh.
will forget the crimes that they committed in the past and all the
Mhm.
history lessons that we can learn from, and we
Mhm.
won't hold them accountable. All we have to do is remember the past, learn from it,
Yeah, okay.
not get sucked into this short term
Right.
flick, flick,
Exactly.
flick, and
Mhm.
just, yes, say, no, no, these are my values. No, you crossed a line. We're
Mhm.
going to hold you accountable, because we
Right.
can do that. And it's very doable.
Okay, and what you say is that, and touching on, is that it is so critical for us to have a united mindset for the greater good. That's why I say it's not about the Democratic Party, the Republican Party. It has to be about America, because what they love right now, what they've done to us, is we've siloed ourselves. So now we're our self, propelling, echo chamber. And in the process of doing that, as Jordan Peterson says, we render ourselves stupid, because you have taken away 50% of the intelligentsia that could contribute to your intellectual growth. But stubbornly, because you've bought into this narrative and this victimization and what they've thrust upon our culture. And now we're looking at our neighbor not as somebody who is a unique, miracle created by God with the same inalienable rights as us, we start looking them as enemies and we silo ourselves away from them. And heaven knows what neighbor or, maybe a coworker that has that missing puzzle piece for our fulfillment in life.
And how much that just your recognition of them could help them survive, right? So many
Exactly.
people are really suffering. The suicide rates, the drug abuse
Oh,
rates have just
yeah.
gone through the roof because people
Right.
are isolated. As you said, they're not only in silos, they're completely feeling isolated. And really, this is a tactic right out of the Marxist, Communist, Leninist playbooks
Mhm.
of divide and conquer, always creating struggle, creating division, and using that to separate people. Because then if you break down society, you create barriers between the things that protect people. And the biggest protections, I've done a lot of research on brainwashing studies actually,
Right.
and how people survive brainwashing. And one of the biggest protections to survive brainwashing through scientific studies and
Mhm.
also my own interviews and observations
Uh-huh.
is a strong family unit.
Yeah.
If you have a strong family unit, you can get through anything. But if the government or the big, authoritarians, tyrannical authoritarians can break that down and separate you from your community, separate you from your family,
Mhm.
you just become flapping in the wind and you will just be perfect target for them. They will give you something. You'll just say, okay, great. That's just what I need to survive. Money, whatever it is. You'll be grateful, and then you'll
Mhm.
do whatever they say.
You
And
settle. You
exactly.
settle.
And then you'll follow whatever mindset that's
Mhm.
given rather than following the truth. You won't see the
Mhm.
truth anymore because all you'll
Right.
see is that's my, that's Big Brother there and
That's
they're
right.
giving me a paycheck. That's it.
Exactly. It'll keep you quiet. Kay, to hear you talk, it reminds me a story of a young man uh, in grade school through going to high school, his freshman high school, and he was just one of these kids that the kids love to pick on, and they just berated this kid incessantly. And one day, as he was going home, some bullies came, and he had his arms full of his books to take home for study, and the kids came by and just knocked the books out of his hands. Everything's flying all over the ground and everything. And this other kid, felt sorry for him and reached down and picked up his books and helped him, kind of gather himself together. And fast forward 4 years later, this same young man was the valedictorian of the high school. And he related this story. He said that that day, because of all the bullying he had been subjected to, he was on his way home to commit suicide. He had given up. But for this one man, this one young boy who stopped to help and pick up his books, that's what gave him hope. To your point, you just don't know what it is that you're going to offer a fellow humanoid in this journey of life and what a difference it could be. So, but for this young man stopping and extending a hand of grace and help toward a fellow humanoid, a fellow classmate, he saves this life of this kid. And oh my goodness, to hear the eloquence of this young man and his valedictorian speech. I mean, I don't think there was a dry eye in the house, Kay.
And you think what a waste that would have been
Yeah,
if he didn't survive to tell that story.
exactly.
And I interviewed probably more than 100 survivors of communist regimes. And one of them, a woman related a story to me about how when she was in a slave labor prison camp in China, a religious prisoner, she hadn't done anything wrong, hadn't technically broken any law.
Mhm.
The guards, slave labor prison camp guards, were so determined to stop any of them from making eye contact with each other. Because if those innocent prisoners made eye contact with each other, that glimmer of spark of hope that
Oh,
says,
yes.
I'm
Mm,
not broken. And she said, you know what was even more powerful than an eye contact? A smile. Oh
yeah,
my goodness. If
mm,
someone smiled, one of
exactly.
the prisoners smiled to the others, even a wry smile or anything, the other people instantly felt that hope of like, oh,
Mm,
they're here. I can do it
exactly.
too. I can do
Exactly.
it too.
Being a man of faith, I read in the Word of God talks about a word aptly spoken. And we often talk about this on the show. is that you just never know. And we have said many times, sometimes it isn't a word, it's just a gesture, a smile, a reassurance that, hey, you know what? I'm there with you, to encourage a fellow journey person that is going through, this time and period of life together. Kay Rubacek, we got about 6 minutes left here. Kay, by the way, ladies, once again, producer, editor with Epoch Times. And we were talking about Gotaways and what's going on at the southern border. I want to fill the rest of this time, if we could, Kay, because you shared some of the stories. And there's probably so many stories as they used to say in the TV series, in the Naked City here, that you have to share that could bring perspective and humanity to what's going on at the southern border. So I'm gonna let you share with us. Go ahead.
Yes, and it really is that, because it's not talking heads, people sitting there and just telling you facts and figures and all of that. It's you get taken in the cars with the sheriffs, and you see the people that are being arrested and what they're being arrested for, and the Americans doing the smuggling, the illegal criminals, illegal aliens coming in, and others who are bringing them across, cartel members, traffickers. You see some of those. Our director even went over to Mexico. And this is something I've never seen before either. There's so much footage in this movie that I guarantee you have never seen anywhere before. No journalists have done this type of coverage. She even went over to Mexico numerous times and quietly filmed illegal immigrants coming over the river. And you see them. They're all who they are. And I won't tell you who they are, but you'll see it's not who you expect. And what they're wearing and what they do. And then how they prepare themselves to cross the river. It's absolutely shocking. And all of this is just, you have to see it to believe it, because I could tell you all the stories, but you would probably, it's hard to believe until you see it.
Well, give us an idea, Kay. What do they do to prepare? Here they've been walking some more than 2,000 miles to come, they're traveling north, our southern border. What do they do in the last part of the journey to prepare the crossing?
Well, don't assume anything. We're all assuming that they're just coming from south of Mexico. They're coming from everywhere.
Oh, yeah. We know China. China is sending them in. They're doing, I think, staging, if I'm hearing this correctly, the last report I got, Kay, they're staging these young battle, ready men, very viral men. They're in Brazil, and they're sneaking them, through the border. And of course, for the cartel, this is an added windfall profit, because the Chinese are paying a premium to come across the border.
Yes, and oftentimes we've been asking how much people are paying, and there's a big range of how much people are paying. We don't always, you can't always verify the numbers, and people often lie to you at the beginning. And there's a woman, I think, somewhere from the Midwest of America, and she hired a U-Haul truck, and when she was pulled up, and the police officer said, the people in the back? She said, oh no, I'm just picking them up, for their car broke down and everything. But our authorities, these guys know how to get the information out. Turns out she was being paid thousands per head to bring them over the border. Now she's getting arrested and charged for, I think it was 3 or 4 counts of human smuggling. Oh, and there's places they're trying to circumvent the checkpoint, and it's not random. And that's what you'll also see in this movie, is that there's the illegal immigrants are coming to certain checkpoints in Mexico. Some are coming by bus, and then they come by taxi, and they go the next leg, and then they walk a certain route, which our director followed them down.
So this is all prescribed. They have a map and a designated area and trail they are to follow, right?
Correct. Yes.
Wow.
Yes.
Ooh, wow.
And when you see them crossing the river, there's nobody there, and it's just unbelievable. And there's another few stories in there where you see a man with women and a group of women, and he's holding a baby. but the women are scared to cross the river. It's a very dangerous part of the river. It's very rapid. And he's saying to them, come on, ma'am, the women are crying. They're scared and they probably can't swim and they're not tall. And he's saying, come on. He's definitely not a father figure. He's definitely not a brother or a cousin or an uncle. He's not a relative. These are most likely traffickers, and we've got them on camera. So that's just shocking.
Well, Kay Rubacek from the Epoch Times, a producer and editor. Kay, remind everybody how they can view this documentary.
Go to gotawaysfilm.com. And if you're already a subscriber to Epoch TV, you've got free access. It's an hour long. If not, then just for a couple of dollars, you can watch the movie. You get a free trial, get a trial and watch the movie. gotawaysfilm.com.
I'll tell you, we're so blessed to have Kay Rubacek with us. Kay, I cannot thank you enough for all the information and great work that you're doing on behalf of freedom for the American people. Thank you so much for being with us.
Oh, thanks for all you do, and thanks for having me.
You got it. For more information and to be a part of this mighty Martinez movement to return to God and to save our country, check it out, BillMartinezShow.com. May God bless you and keep you and make his face shine upon you. And may he be gracious unto you and give you his peace. Go and be blessed to bless others. Thanks for being with us.